Hi, I'm Brad. This is my first meeting.
Hi, Brad.
Yeah. So I'm the weirdo on the motorcycle that doesn't make any noise talking to myself. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. I don't really know how much I need to add about personal background on it, but I'm excited for this. I've been looking forward to this all week. So yeah. I'm going to message Nicole on Messenger, make sure she's in and can hear us real quick. So I'm going to mute myself again.
All right. Hey, Mario. I'm the section chief of Shenanigans Department, and you know that's what I bring to the table. Nah, I'm kidding. I really appreciate everybody being here. Retired EOD Air Force, 20 years. Stayed in a Holiday Inn Express once. Pretty much friends with everybody in this group. Who are still either active duty or retired or separated in some way, shape, or form. So looking forward to seeing what everybody has to add.
Steve, you're next.
I didn't realize I was next. Sorry. Yeah, Steve Dubois. I'm active duty Air Force EOD. For those who don't know, somewhere around 19 years. Yeah, just glad to be in the group. My educational background is I have a bachelor's in social psychology, so focus in abnormal, and a master's in social work. And I'm looking at PhD programs, which I don't know why. But yeah, that's really glad to be in the group. I'm excited as well about the topic. So thanks for having me.
Steve, what are you going to do for your PhD?
OD, so many ideas. Some of them actually sparked by Tribe, as well as some things I've been thinking on with suicide that actually might come up tonight. Just a different perspective on how people normally talk about it, specifically to do with males and the kind of epidemic going on right now with male suicide in America specifically. So yeah, I got a few ideas. We'll see. I'll let you know.
D, you're up next.
My turn. So I'll use my handle. I am the Sweet D. Diana is my first name, but everyone calls me Sweet D. So I think that grew out of a deployment once. Anyway, so active duty Air Force, 18 years, all of it in EOD with these fine gentlemen. That's how I crossed all their paths, actually. So I'll do the Dubois, a little bit of my educational background. I have a bachelor's in psychology, and I'm currently working on a master's in psychology with a concentration in child and developmental psych. And I haven't washed my hair in 3 days, so sorry, guys.
I was wondering what that smell was.
I could smell it through the video. Dave, you want to give us a quick intro about yourself, a quick background?
You're on mute, Dave. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I followed half of the instructions and forgot the second half. Just turned 65 years old. I'm still working more or less full time. Volunteered the last almost 21 years as an EMT. Couple years as a firefighter in a small rural town that is host to one of Brad's favorite wineries, I found out, in southern New Jersey. So we got a date planned for a bottle of wine whenever he gets back here stateside. Looking forward to that. That's about it. I said 20 plus years EMS now. Served 5 or 6 years as chief of the department and back in that role again now after a couple of years semi-retirement. I spent about a year working with an organization in emergency services locally called the Mercury team that focuses on critical incident stress management, debriefing for EMS, fire, police. I stepped away from that for a period when I went back into the chief's role. Just didn't have the time to commit to it. But just
I'm Webb.
Succinct.
Oh, that's it?
That was an I am Groot moment right there.
Yeah, I'm an active guard. I've been in for a little over 16 years. I know Brad and Mario just by my time in service, and I know basically everybody else here through either I know Gerbo from all the Christmas parties, and I know you guys from VTC. Yeah, I'm the fly tying guy.
Sean, you're up next.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean. Started off as Air Force EOD. Got out of that, went to federal law enforcement. Retired from that. Just kind of rudderless after that, so kind of going all over the place. I like long walks on the beach, warm hugs, a nice mimosa every once in a while. Pretty simple guy.
Nikki, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I am active duty Air Force Intel. I've been in for 17 years. I was on a WIT team with Brad, so that's how I know him. He wasn't on the WIT team, but he was EOD with me while on a WIT team. And I spent enough time with EOD to know that there are a bunch of people that I love and would give my life for in a heartbeat. So I am currently stationed in Florida at Herbert Field. I have 2 kids. My husband's active duty security forces. That's about it.
Last but certainly not least, the magnanimous Gerbo.
Thank you, Brad. Hi, everybody. I'm Jerbo, aka Jerry Shelton. I guess I bring to the Felix Project group effort I'm the boomer of the group. So thanks, Dave, for taking a little heat off me today. I'm the butt of all of Mario's jokes and Dee's references to periods of gray hair that shows up from time to time. But I also have an Air Force EOD background. I did 30 years, retired about 8 years ago. I decided I'd go to school and kind of learn, what the kids are doing these days. And I was interested in a master's in education and human development with a concentration on organizational leadership and learning. And I loved it. And so I'm a big why person. I like to understand why people think the way they do, why they act in groups the way they do. And I think this conversation today will be great for that because it's something I'm interested in. So I'm very interested in hearing what everybody thinks about what society means to them. Another thing about me is I'm very proud to say that my youngest daughter has just become a nurse. So she worked on the COVID floor yesterday and scared the hell out of me and mom because of her stories. But she's normally an ortho neuro nurse, so we're very proud of her. But I'm also interested in what this means to a millennial's perspective, what being a caregiver, someone with a big heart that puts the needs of others ahead of their own, and what challenges she'll face in her career field, similar to what everybody faced in their walks, either in the military being deployed with accidents, incidents as a medical professional and all. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Cool. Unless Mari, you got any objection, I say we just get right into it. So like we kind of talked about earlier, we're going to have Dave and Nikki, you can rock, paper, scissors for who goes first, I guess. But I'm going to read the actual passage straight from the book and then let you guys, one of you guys start talking. But if you have you don't have your thoughts formulated or whatever, just let me know. I got a couple of thought-provoking questions to help you. If you're not ready yet and you want to wait till later, just say the word. This is no stress, no pressure. So anyway, all that aside, humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary. It's time for that to end. Dave, looks like you're unmuted at the moment, so if you want to lead us off, feel free.
All right, as I said, again, thinking about how do we define those things. That idea of feeling necessary, having meaning, doing something worthwhile is critical. I'm a carpenter by trade. Most of my career has been in remodeling. And I remember a point probably 10 years ago now where for a little while I went back into the sales side of remodeling. And I find myself trying to sell somebody a kitchen who they think is going to solve all their problems in life, and agonizing over the color of the grout or the backsplash or these minute details. And I just got to the point where give me a break. I don't have the time, the patience for this. Life is too important. So I found a lot of that meaning. As I began to work as an EMT, but even that, the interaction with people was short. Sometimes would make a real difference. Sometimes it was nonsense. And so more and more, I'm just focused on trying to understand what really makes people tick, what drives them, what's important to them, and how to support and encourage them in that. How to get them to think more deeply about who they are and what matters, and not waste their time chasing their tail on stuff that is going to disappear. I'll leave it there for the moment.
And I think that's some good points to bring up there, Dave, about perspectives on those definitions. Like at the point in somebody's life, maybe that kitchen is the biggest thing that matters, and sometimes some of us get a little caught up in our experiences, our perspectives. And, in the end, it's not a competition is really what this should come back to, is what I'm getting at. It should, we should let these experiences help us learn and grow and become better humans so that we help other people. And, that was just one of the thoughts I had talking about, being a salesman. Like that's definitely a whole different take on hardship, because there's hardship there. You gotta do a good job. You gotta make some money, pay the bills, feed the family. So there's still something there too. Just because it's not taking apart a bomb on the side of a road in Iraq or cleaning up a major vehicle accident doesn't mean that there's not still something there, some purpose and challenge and some opportunity for growth.
That's an excellent point. That goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We need to understand how somebody else is viewing something. It's way too easy for us to look at things from our perspective, from our experience, our lens, and take ourselves too seriously in that. But I think, and in part, the last part of this, where it talks about society's perfected the art of making people feel unnecessary. I think part of how society has done that is feed us the idea that if you have this, then life will work. If you have that, life will work. If you rather so while you need to be sensitive to somebody in what their desire is and help them accomplish that, I think there's a place for me where I also want to be able to help them get some perspective and think a little bit more deeply. Are they chasing something that isn't going to satisfy them, and is there a better way to go with that? Something to add to that perspective, without just writing them off as a foolish person.
if I can add just something, Brad, Dave, I thought, I like what you say about perspectives, and that's something that a lot of people in this group are striving towards. We're not perfect, but what I'm curious to hear from you is, how do you go about being open to other people's perspectives? Is that something that you've learned over time on different scenes? How have you gotten to this point where you're able to look at it on scene from somebody else's perspective?
I think on scene it's not that hard, Mario, because I'm there. They're my focus. My goal is to understand what they're experiencing right now. Physically, sometimes, and quite frankly, probably 40% of my calls now are psychiatric emergencies. Just some crazy stuff. Some of it just some of it not a big deal, and others of it really off the wall crazy. So again, it's treating somebody with respect, listening to them, trying to understand their story as much as possible. If there's something on a medical basis that I can help them with, obviously do that. But I mean, I'm thinking of one old man back in, it was probably late March, early April, at the height of this coronavirus craziness, where everything was gloves and masks, and anybody you get near is likely to kill you because they're going to breathe on you. And there's this old man who lived in a trailer mobile home. Just thought people were stealing from him, just crazy stuff. And the troopers there talking to him, and she's got her N95 mask on, and standing 6 feet away from him. And I had a mask on. I walked up and shook his hand. Hey, my name's David. How are you doing? So I want to connect with people as a person, not just not a patient, not a one more person I got to get in the ambulance and get to the hospital and get on to the next one. Just trying to look at people as individuals, ask about them, their lives, their families, as much as time permits. But again, that's usually a half hour, 40-minute interaction. So, that can be easy. It's when you're dealing with somebody, longer term, closer contact, that it becomes sometimes more challenging to focus entirely on them and put up with their nonsense or their perceived nonsense. I'm not always so good at it in the longer term. The short term, I'm real good. People talk to me, so I don't know what you do. That I look at medical people who do chronic care, long-term care, and say, you guys are the ones who are special. To me, it's quick and easy, and generally exciting and fun. But there's an opportunity to touch people and try to make a difference for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And Brad, I'd like to kick it back to you, or your friend. Definitely get her take on some of this stuff as well.
Yeah, I think Nicole had. I saw her come on mute a couple times. Did you have something to add, Nicole?
I've lost my train of thought, so we're good.
Well, I'm sorry.
You might have seen mine. You might have seen my mic up, Brad. I had Dave, when you were talking about how you responded to that case, it was different than everybody else around you. I was thinking empathy. Do you find, if that word fits for someone in your profession on that response, do you feel like empathy is a skill set that you all have, that you would be the one that would put the person at ease? Or are there some that aren't in your career field that aren't culturally wired like that? Do you think it comes with part of the culture of your organization?
That's a good question. I think, and I think it's a perfect word for that. I think there's a lot of people who definitely have that. I've also worked with people who've spent who's been their career, who've worked, particularly a couple of people I'm thinking of who've spent most of their career working in the city of Camden, and they're not they're not always near as empathetic. They tend to be much more, get up and walk out to the stretcher. Not so quick to sympathize with somebody, and just harder edge. And I think in part that's because of the kind of people that they deal with, just self-protection, and I think that's probably some of it. When you deal with hard things all the time, you've got to, to a certain level, put up, you got to develop a hard shell so that you can get through this one, get on to the next one. Some people seem to be better than others at finding that balance of being empathetic and yet, not being sucked into the bullshit, really.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Nicole, are you ready to go, or did you get your train of thought back?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Let's go with D. D, you ready to go?
Yeah, I can always wax poetic a little bit longer. So the word empathy, like that one really kind of stuck out to me because, it's, I don't want to call it a hot topic, but actually I just did a whole module on it in my master's class about like empathy and ethics and psychological practice, but then like just connecting with people about what it is that they're going through. And it is easy, if you're like Dave was saying about the guys that work in Camden all the time, and I'm sure, you kind of reach a point of saturation where you kind of start losing that empathy, like that you start to harden your heart because you see the same, like in some instances you see the same shit all the time, like if you're responding to the same person who's OD'd 2, 3, 4 times, like I can see where you start like, putting that wall up to distance yourself. Or like my friend Vanessa, or I have a friend that's a first sergeant, and she was kind of talking about dealing with spouses in her old squadron, and how she needed a break because she starts losing any sympathy or empathy for them and what they're going through, because that's what she just dealt with that all the time. And now she's in a different unit, and obviously the dynamic is different. And but I just thought that was interesting. Like when you're constantly like exposed to it, like it's real easy to get burned out. And I think it's important to recognize the signs of being burned out, like or like where your burnout like threshold is. And I think I've been absent a lot lately. I'm sure you guys noticed. And like a lot of that is because of a loss that occurred recently. Like it was all I had to get through the week, Monday through Friday, get home. I don't really have a lot left. And then by the time I got to the weekend, it was just done. I'd spend all weekend in bed because the tank was empty. And it took every little ounce of energy I had to do the Monday through Friday stuff and then get through each day. So like, that's why I was empty. I had nothing left to give. So I think it is important to recognize when you're at that point and, do what you got to do. And today, going out for 21 miles, that was, it's just kind of like my way, probably, I don't know, for some people, and that's why I say it's up to you how you define fun. For me, that's a way to replenish, it's, I don't know, it's one of the things I do to rebuild that, for some reason, riding my bike and going a long distance, I'm able to think a lot and process more, as opposed to it's be gentle with yourself. It's okay to take a knee and lay in bed all weekend, one weekend, or maybe two, let's be honest. But then after that, at least for me, I'm gentle with myself. Hey, it's okay. You can do that. Now you got to figure out now what? How do you deal with this? How do you process it? So that's part of my process.
So, going back to the quote, that's some pretty heavy stuff there, D. The interesting part about the quote is it says that people thrive on hardship, and I don't think he means it in a broad stroke way, but I think I won't get too much into it right now, but I think there's a lot behind the meaning and purpose you can find in these tough times. I think is the big thing, like, coming together to find a way to help people and try to do something about these things. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does, because like it's funny. Actually, I think I saw Mario in 2016, and I was at the Air Force Master Resilience Trainer course, and it gets a bad rap, like resilience. And I'm not a fan of the word myself, because there's like that implied that you're going to be the same way on the other side as you were when you entered this hardship in your life. And I think if you're the exact same person that you were going into a hardship, coming out of it, I just don't think it's possible. And then two, I would say you didn't learn anything, because like the greatest lessons that I have learned, the biggest growth moments for me came out of a hardship. And it's the same like with this. Like I had this, that was a shit week, honestly. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss, but you can bleep me, Mario. But like but it also, I turned and looked and was like, well, what are some lessons that I can learn from this? What are some, I look back at everything, maybe not everything, but a lot of things that I learned from that individual. And I'm just like, oh, I need to make more of an effort to incorporate this in what I do with my guys. So pass on those little, and I think one of the biggest ones that really, hit me, I was looking back at photos, and I found a photo at Fort Rucker of us in the snow at Fort Rucker. And the lesson that I turned, that I had 3 guys leave for CST yesterday, and I kind of told them like, hey, here's a little perspective, like, the showers might be cold. You're going to spend a lot of downtime that's and stuff that's not worth your, I don't know, well, we all complained about CST. I don't think any of us didn't at some point, but said you guys are going to make some good memories together, and maybe, focus on that. So this is one thing I look back, and I'm really glad I have those memories and photos from those events of those people who are gone now. So definitely taught me a little bit more about perspective this time around, and like the meaning that you can find in hardship and struggle and trauma, and the growth, the post-traumatic growth that comes from trauma.
I think one of the big things that I've always noticed that bothers me, like words matter to me, and people talk about moving on, and I think if you're moving on, you're missing the point. You shouldn't be moving on. You should be learning how to live with your experiences, is kind of how I view it. Like, I don't want to forget about even the bad times. I want to remember them to make the good times better and to learn from them. So just a thought that your conversation there sparked in my head.
And I like what you said about that. Like, I tell people, our base has been through, like, we just had a loss recently. An airman died in a car accident approaching the gate. We have 8 miles from the boundary to the gate. So a lot of room in there for error. But like, and then there was another youngster that died in a parachuting accident. We've lost a lot. We've lost 5 guys in the last 11 months. Like one drowned, motorcycle accident. It's just all kinds of stuff. There's a suicide. But what I was telling the senior NCOs that worked with these guys, like, these are their troops and whatnot. And like, I know I would be crushed if something happened to one of my guys, but I told them, like, hey, grief is a process, and your grief process is your process. It doesn't look like other people's, and sometimes people might judge you because they think like that you should be over it or move past it. Like, and I hate that, because we don't say that. Like, when somebody posts pictures of their baby, and then a year later we see the first birthday party and the second birthday party, we don't tell them, we've already seen the birthday, like, move on. We don't tell them that. But why is it that, like, when somebody that we care about deeply, they pass away, and like, we don't, but why do we tell people move on from that? Like, that's it doesn't make any sense. I hate it. Like, no, you don't move on. Like, I think you take that and you carry some of it, whether it's losing, you carry part of that person with you and the things that they taught you. And then, from the experiences that you have, you take some of that with you too. Like, you never truly move on. Like, you grow, but just, all right, sign in.
Yeah, D, if I may, you brought up something that we talk about all the time, and especially with COVID right now, there are so many people that they want to move on. They want to forget that this happened, and they just want things to go back the way they were. And the whole time you were talking about that, and Brad, you've brought it up before, that's all I'm thinking about right now. A cautionary tale is, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I'm paying attention to what's happening right now, and I'm trying to learn from it. I'd like to hear if anybody's learned from this experience so far and some ways to incorporate in the future.
If I can share something that Dee kind of sparked in my mind, was this kind of a compulsion to have the perfect life, whether social media fuels that or what, but everything we have to be shielded from all the bad things. We can't talk about bad things. It leads to stigma. We talk about, not being able to say names. Well, that's out of respect, and it's also out of, certain laws and policies about keeping things close hold because of the sensitivities. Well, what does that do for anyone if you can't learn, really, if you can't experience through their eyes how, the hardship was overcome, and maybe there's something I can take from that. It's almost like you have to just wait for it to happen to you before you really know how you're going to deal with it. So thanks, Dee, for kind of planting that in my mind. It's just that whole got to live our best life and move on, right? Look what they've done since, the amputation years ago, and look at all the great things. And those are great examples, but it's almost, it leaves out just the normal hardships of loss and day-to-day stuff that's, we're wired to overcome problems and survive fights with dinosaurs and stuff, right? We're losing that because we're so shielded from pain all the time. So I'd like to talk about it more. And I think this is part of that conversation. So.
Jared, do you want to continue since you kind of got a good track going there?
What, me? Oh, well, I don't know. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about the next part about the, what was the other part of the statement? Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary. It's time for that to end, right? That's an interesting one, because I think about, like, I'll throw in my nerd hat for a minute. So I'm a gamer as well, and I've been kind of playing Red Dead Redemption 2 a lot, right? So this happens around 1899. We're coming out of the Old West. We pretty much conquered the whole continent, and now we can just get on a train and go from Chicago to LA. That's hard. That's hard duty, to do something like that. But back then, your other option was just to ride a horse and go fighting your way through, the wilderness to get there. So even back then, society made things easier on some people, right? If you had the means to do it, you would do it because it made things easier. So we're kind of like, our society evolves to reduce hardships in our lives. You know, we get better health care, we get better, you know, education. We're striving to become better, to reduce hardships. The drawback of that is, like I said before, the train of thought was we don't experience a lot of hardships except for like when I go camping and I'm missing the Wi-Fi connection. So that's a hardship for me. That's how bad it's gone, right? So I think there's like, I would like to hear whatever the others think about, is technology a good way of developing society in a way that reduces hardship? Or is there kind of a happy medium? Should we escape from technology in society and go on these long bike rides, camping trips, whatever? Is that how we deal with it? Do we get off the train altogether and get off the grid? You know, if you agree that society and technology go hand in hand to make us feel less necessary, what do you think are the options for getting off of that treadmill? Open question.
So if I could jump in. So I'm trying to keep it micro here because I have some macro thoughts going on in my head with this stuff a lot. And, you know, to your specific question, Gerbo, you know, technology, I think this is sort of like before that, if I can say that. You know, the technology advances have certainly made us more able to be isolated from human contact and connectedness in that real human way. Obviously, look how connected we are, obviously connected in a different way here. I think like before the big technology booms of social media and, you know, really reducing the ability, it's getting so bad that, you know, the young people can't even tell social cues anymore and what they mean. And so we have almost like we're losing language in that way. But this made me think of a lot of things, but community, right? A lot of this is about community in some way. And we live in a society where the individual and individualistic ideals are sort of front and center in America. It's like, go get it, man, work hard, more hours, you know, those lawyers out there, get those billable hours, man, like strive. And then it's almost like we're just doing it, you know, as a society, and we've sort of lost perspective on like, what is it all about? And so when I read like, you know, humans don't mind hardship, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. It makes me think about what makes you feel necessary. Like if you are crushing it in a job and you go home to your sweet pad and your nice car and your whatever, you know, at some point it's like, what's this about? And I think we're missing the community aspect. A lot of what this is about to me is about, you know, do you feel like you have a village, whether that's right where you are or it includes people that are in different places? But that's how people feel necessary a lot of times. And then that gets into culture, right? That's an American culture thing, to where it's like, I'm sitting here in Germany and we've got all these spouses that are from different parts of the country and the world, and sort of organically they've set up like a village and a community, right? And they lean on each other, they depend on each other, and the difference between them and some who are really struggling, it's not too hard to see. Like there's a community and a village and a feeling of interdependence. And I got you and I'll be there for you. Oh yeah, I got you. And then the next time you'll get me. That builds something. And I think we're missing that a lot in America. I think about being in you know, suburbs most of my life, and You know, how many people can say like they really knew like their neighbors on the street? There's a lot of people that next door, they're like, I don't know. I learned about them when like the ambulance came for something, or, you know, we we grow the hedges, you know, and we say keep out, and I don't think we realize the toll that that takes, because the society we grew up in is one where the individual is above all. And I don't want to get wax political, but it's part of the culture. And you know, some of what Sebastian Junger was getting at is like, you know, this is this. Started doing some reading, and I'll shut up here in another 30 seconds. But it brought up for me, you know, the suicide issue, right? And I've been doing some reading on the numbers, and it's very interesting. And for those of you who don't know, you know, 70% of the suicides in America are white males. It's a pretty big number, right? And various people have various, you know, thoughts on that about why. And most people that I talk to focus on, well, white males are being told a lot that they are privileged and, you know, they have this great life. And so maybe that's causing them to not seek help when they need it, because they're being inundated with that information. I think it's interesting to look at it from that perspective. It's also interesting to say, if we think that everyone has struggles, then what is it about others as well? Why aren't the numbers more equivalent? You know, and that's something that I'd like to kind of peel back, but that would take some research. But here we have 70%, 3.5 times more likely than any other ethnic group. And why is that? Because that's the majority of America, right? What is going on there? And I think it does tie in to this passage that we're talking about right now. Not feeling necessary. I mean, there's people out there like Jordan Peterson who have a whole career based on the idea that he's trying to bolster the young people who don't feel necessary. They don't have a purpose. So those are just some of my thoughts. I'm trying not to get too macro because I think this is a societal thing when we're talking about this, but I don't want to get too far down that path. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
So, Stephen, you give me a new sense of meaning and feeling necessary. When my ambulance shows up, neighbors are going to get to know each other.
Absolutely, that's important.
Small
I like
victories.
what you said, Dave, earlier about that and how you approach that empathy. And it brought up a question in my head that I'd like to hear from you guys about. Do you think you can teach empathy? Because the way, I think it was you, Gerbo, I forget who talked about empathy a little more. It's like, can you teach that? Because I used to, one of my internships was for an organization called Care 7 in Phoenix. And we would roll out with the cops and with EMT on certain calls where there was like a mental health aspect to it. And I saw that multiple times, right? Like sometimes guys are standing around, kind of joking around, and there's frankly, there's a body there. And other times you had some people who responded and they know it's over, but they're making a show for the family. And so I saw those different ways people react, and it brought up that, as you were talking about, maybe you can speak to it, Dave, in your experiences. Do you think, and for everybody else too, do you think that's something you can teach? Empathy, that is.
That's a good question, and I think again we go back to definitions. What's our definition of teach? And I've thought recently about the word apprenticeship, and certainly as a carpenter, I experienced that at a certain level. But I think so much of our teaching, so much of our education at this point, it is more academic. Take a class, read a book, take a test. Okay, now you know it. But the idea of apprenticeship is, it takes time to show somebody how you do something. Then you give that person an opportunity, to help you do it, and then you let them do it, and you watch. It doesn't happen overnight. I think so often, in the EMT schools is a perfect example. Supposedly, you go through your 250 hours of training, and you're certified. You're an EMT now. Go do it. Well, the reality is, in my opinion, basically you've learned enough. Now you can go out and start learning how to do it. You basically, you haven't learned how to do it. You've learned enough that you can start learning, and it's through practice and experience that you develop, the judgment and wisdom to be able to function effectively. And certainly empathy is not something you're going to read a book or you're going to listen to a lecture. Now I got it. I can go do that. I think in a large part that's something you learn. And then Steve, you talked about standing around with a dead body, and absolutely there's times we're in a sense putting on a show for the family. But more important than that, one thing that I learned fairly early in my career from other people with more experience than me is in that setting, we all of a sudden have more than one patient. Particularly if our patients died, now I need to focus my attention on the wife, on the daughter, the family members who may not have a medical emergency at this point, but they sure got an emergency. And that's where that empathy comes in, and understanding what's happening around you, some situational awareness.
Thanks for that, Dave. I guess when you started talking, I sort of thought maybe I should have asked, because that's all good, and I thought what I meant is, can you learn empathy, not can you teach it? You know what I mean? Like, because there's some people who have, I think, that naturally, right? And some people would say those people might be even attracted to some certain career fields, but some people don't. I've certainly seen that, and I wonder if they can learn it, or do you have to sort of have? I hope they can. That's my sense. I hope people could learn to be empathetic, but then doesn't that mean they have to be open, right? They would have to open their aperture and think of people, let's say, with the hundreds of responses an EMT would have in a certain area, like, Old Camden, and then you're encountering violence and you're encountering drugs and sort of like maybe the same people, same blocks. And then that compassion fatigue that sets in, which is very normal, is that something that can sort of be reborn? And in people that sort of are a little bit more detached, because that's also necessary sometimes to have a little bit of space. And then that balance that you were talking about, Dave. So it makes me just think, like, can people learn empathy? And is that important? Do you feel like that's an important part of what you do?
It is. And the first thing that comes to mind is, as you started talking, was switching from teaching to learning. And I think that's a valuable point to consider, because I don't think we can teach anybody anything, but lots of people can learn. So, somebody's got to want to learn before you can teach them. So that's a critical component. But then when you talk about, some people seem to have empathy naturally, or more of empathy, I think that's an important thing to understand, in that, each of us are gifted in different ways. And if everybody was exactly the same and had all the same strengths, we'd be pretty lopsided. we need different people with different strengths and different perspectives. On any situation, we need that team, we need that tribe. Use that word based on our topic for the day. I think I've got lots of strengths in lots of areas, but part of the benefit of getting old is I realize more and more how little I know, and how great my blind spots can still be. And I need somebody else to, who's going to see that stuff and fill that gap, or, I'm going to get in trouble. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that, while we can all learn, we can all grow in areas. Some of us are going to be more gifted, more talented naturally in those areas. And we need to be able to use their strengths without feeling like we're something less than we ought to be, and at the same time be able to recognize our strengths or somebody else's strengths and how they complement and then backfill the gaps in somebody else's ability to function.
I'll make this last note about empathy and then shut up for a while. So my mom was an ER nurse in Brooklyn, New York for 40 years. She tried other kinds of nursing, but she always came back to the emergency room. And it was like the #1 trauma center in New York City for a while when I was growing up. And one of the things I learned from her was like that balance. I learned that, sometimes she talked about people coming in and they're all full of like, I just want to help and compassion and and she said she could tell like they would burn out, and then you had people who just, were sort of cold and detached. But, they would recognize that the people that had sort of like some kind of balance, like nobody's perfect, but they had aspects of being able to be sort of a certain level of, I don't know if detached is the word I want to use, but they could put a little bit of distance and still have empathy. They could sort of go on, and they were constantly fighting the balance because they cared, but they couldn't just let it overwhelm them every time, right? Like a child comes in with a bad situation and, you go to pieces and then you can't make it, because there's other people to help. And finding that balance was like a skill set, right? And I always thought about that, like how amazing would that be if we could sort of teach and learn that that balance? Because I know in the mental health world, and Dee knows this too, like 5 years is a big number for sort of like compassion fatigue when people start working sort of really intense environments. And so I just thought that was interesting. And you, Dave, with your experience and other people here too, I wonder what your thoughts are on that balance, because I think that's also important for sort of humans and hardship, and having that balance of being able to be there for other people, take care of yourself, have that community, but also have your own family and your own situation taken care of. It's all that balance stuff.
I'm hearing a lot of hard versus soft skills. One of the terms, that I was familiar with in my studies. And I think you can learn all the hard skills of a career field to the point where you can't learn anymore. Maybe you can learn a couple new updates or something like that. But the soft skills, the self-awareness, the emotional intelligence, the empathy, the, how to communicate better, those are things you kind of learn along the way, I think. And you can also learn from reading about theory, which you can take a little bit of this and that from whoever philosopher is talking about what theory, and you can learn and process and practice some things. But a lot of times it's the mentorship, the having someone that's a little more senior in that field that you can learn from by either observing them, how they operate, or maybe asking direct questions. Hey, how do I be less of a jerk at work? Like, what am I doing wrong? So those are all great points. I just want to kind of throw a couple terms your way, like hard versus soft skills. And I think, yeah, they can be taught. Whether they can be really learned, to Dave's point, that's really the key, and that's all individual. Some people can learn it by reading it. Some people can observe it. You know, whether you're a visual learner, maybe somebody will learn something from our discussion here that they'll take away a little piece and think about that later. Like, yeah, you know, maybe I could show a little bit more empathy when I'm dealing with my partner or dealing with my crazy teenage children or whatever the case may be, you know. And I think that's part of learning too, having the conversation. So this is great stuff. Thanks.
Okay, I lied. I had one more thing because you just made me think of something. You made me think of when, you know, I heard about certain people in our career and I remember having conversations with people who would be like, yeah, hey, we had this guy who was like super kind of like whatever, right-wing Christian, like not good with this, you know, multiple people in the career field. And then you had this interaction, and this is what I'm getting to, where they would have this mind-changing thing. Maybe it didn't change their belief system all the way to the core, but they had a meeting and they're like, oh, this person, you know, I'm no longer gonna just say certain things about this person because I've met them, I've worked with them, whatever the case might be, and now that's real to me and it's put a human face on it, and now I think a little bit differently. And to me, that's that big piece. And connecting to what you were saying, Gerbo, it's like, you know, that's how people kind of, I've seen that so many times, and I think that has to do with sort of this community aspect. So many people have not encountered people, or they have a certain idea of people. In the medical community, there's been a lot of research about how certain people are treated differently, and some of the research is pretty compelling, and it begs the question, you know, those interactions that we have, you know, how important they are, and how understanding. One of my professors once said, if you know someone's story, everything makes sense. And a lot of times I don't think we always take the time to know someone's story. And taking the time to know someone's story builds community. It builds the village. It gets us to the feeling necessary, but also feeling like others understand us. So anyway, I just wanted to say that because I've heard about several of those instances where people have changed. And that's what I'm talking about with that aperture, opening it up, and then being able. So that's where, so that person learned empathy in a way, right? By sort of an interaction. They didn't know that's what was happening, but that did happen. And now they're saying, huh, the next person that is in that category that I had, I might consider that a little differently. It makes me think about an EMT responding somewhere. Hey, I've been here so many times, drug this, drug that. But I found out the other day that this kid in this bad community has like straight A's, and, you know, he's crushing it. And he lives right here. And maybe I'm going to be a little bit more empathic with this next person that I respond to and a little less cold. And all those interactions are so huge, right? You could go from a real contentious time where, oh, here's a cop, right, responding to something, and there's an antagonistic environment, but that person takes the time to say, hey, I'm here to help. And maybe just those words just disarms that person. And that's a village, and that's community, and that's feeling necessary and feeling seen and acknowledged. For real, I'm done this time.
Nikki, I saw you were unmuted there for a bit. Did you have something to add?
I did. When he was talking about balance, I think balance plays a big part when it comes to everything, because balance is important on on all aspects. When you're talking about balance, it can be balance for your empathy, because for me, I struggle when it comes to balance at home with empathy. I can give all of the empathy in the world to other people, but then when I come home, it's a little bit harder because I don't know why, right? So, but when I'm at work or when I'm dealing with people outside of home, it's a lot easier for me to sit down and open up and be very transparent and have that balance when it comes to empathy of caring. And then at the same time, you also learn that you can't be empathetic with everyone. No matter how you may want to, some people kind of make it hard for you to show that empathy towards them based on their actions and their words. So balance is really big when we're talking about empathy in general. But like I said, it's easier for me to do it outside and with other people. And while I sat in as the shirt for 4 months, I definitely saw a big difference in how I acted across the board when it came to everyone that came in that office, especially during COVID. Being a shirt, when that's not your primary job during COVID, is by far one of the most stressful 4 months I've ever had in my life. Yet at the same time, it gave me purpose and it gave me a sense of reason. And the part leading up to that, I was very depressed, very stressed out doing my normal job as a flight chief. But for some reason, once I got into that role of being the first sergeant for those 4 months, I felt like I had a purpose again, and I felt motivated to keep doing the things that I needed to do to take care of the unit, those folks, even though I always had purpose. But for some reason during that time, before that, I didn't, because I didn't feel like I was needed. And so I think this passage hits a little different for me in that aspect, because technology does make it hard for people to feel necessary, especially when you have keyboard warriors behind the keyboard that doesn't know you, making comments or saying things to you, or even people that do know you, making comments and making you feel less worth than what you are. And I think that's how a lot of people struggle when it comes to the technology aspect, is because especially for gamers or folks that are influencers on social media or whatever, all it takes is for someone who doesn't know you to say something that pushes you over the edge to where you feel like, well, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why am I still doing this? So that's what I took from reading that, is that technology makes it easier for people to not feel needed when you have the ability for people to tell you that you're not needed. And then you start to believe those things. But once you are able to have a sense of community or belonging outside of that, which is where we go wrong currently, is because there's not a lot of physical social interaction happening. And a lot of people are more focused on being on electronics or devices or computers or whatever, and they're not spending time with actual people. So that's how it's easy to feel like they're not necessary when they're not physically spending time with people that let them know that they're needed or wanted.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, here. Very good points.
There's definitely some solid stuff. It's crazy what a little bit of purpose can do for your meeting. You know, it can really kick you in the pants and get you going in the right direction and help you realize you actually did have that meeting before. You know, I think that was one of the things I really keyed in on what you just said there, Nikki. Like, you know, you realized you had meeting before, but you didn't realize it until you got put into a harder position or a different perspective of a position. So that's definitely good stuff. Webb, what you got?
How are you? I was thinking about a little while ago, Gerbo had mentioned technology. It's like asking for the answer, like, do we turn technology off, or what do we do to get rid of it because of some of the effects that it had? I thought that was a good idea. Kind of like sometimes it's necessary to turn everything off or go out for a hike or spend some time away from your Wi-Fi in the woods camping. I think that's a good idea. Then I kind of like immediately thought, do the opposite, not totally, but when Steve, you mentioned community, I really appreciated that, because I don't think people talk about that, because I think like older societies were built around community. A lot of religions were even built around community. That's kind of how some of them it came about. Like a lot of your morals, yeah, and the things that you believe don't necessarily need to come from religion bias or anything, but like your community, what's right, what's wrong, what are you getting taught? I thought that was pretty cool. So I was thinking about that, and then, well, right now without this technology, none of us here would be able to sit here and experience this community. I mean, right now we're all part of a community. We're sharing thoughts and ideas and opinions and learning from each other. So I had that thought immediately when you brought up community, and I think that's a real thing, that community or lack thereof. I tried to write down some things that I thought would be important to mention. One of them was, has life, and this isn't literal, but has life become too easy? Does having everything done for you make you soft? That's just a question that I wrote down. And I don't mean by like people are doing things for you, and I don't mean life is getting easier by the day. I mean like things are generally easier. As far as being alive goes for humans, I think this is the best time to be alive. I could get on my phone while I'm having a conversation with you guys. I could be completely rude. I could probably do it without looking and order something and get it. I could get it here. I could get food here while I'm sitting here. I don't even have to get up. It's insane. I can move money. I can take my money while I'm on the phone here, and I can invest it. I can invest, whatever I want to do. I can move it. I could lose money. I could gain money. I could turn the TV on. I can drive anywhere in the country right now. It always wasn't like that. It's a really good time for people to be alive. I said when the quarantine came around, it's like if there was going to be a quarantine and you had to be alive for it, this is the best time to get quarantined. I mean, you can learn anything you want to learn right now. You can get on the internet. I can Google. You could give me something. If I could be like, what do you want to learn? And I could tell you about it in less than a minute. It's an incredible time to be alive, to learn things. But in the same aspects, like if something breaks or I need to do something, or I need to, like, there's somebody there to do it for me. If my phone breaks, I just take it to a store and they fix it for me. And then my life is still easy again. It's like, where's the hardship in that? And I think that kind of makes you soft, right? Because to get food, right, I can get food with this phone. If my phone breaks, I can get upset about it. Oh, how am I going to get food? Oh, well, now I got to drive. Oh, no, I got to drive to a store and have them fix my phone. It's going to be terrible. Oh, what a terrible day. It's like, I think the perception of what, like, we all understand what a real hardship is, but I think the overall perception of what's difficult and what really isn't difficult, it kind of makes people soft in a way. And I think that changes. I think that changes like what you think a real hardship is. So that gives people, I think, a false sense of purpose. Like, hopefully I'm making a good point here. Am I making a good point? Having a false sense of purpose is
relative. It's relative.
Is almost as dangerous as not having a purpose at all. You actually believe in it. If I believe to a certain point that we're posting a picture like on Instagram, something that I'm doing, is like, that's my purpose in life. And if I don't get enough likes, that's my purpose. This isn't like everything, but it creates, I think, a false sense of purpose. And when you don't have a good purpose, I think your view of reality is skewed. So that's my opinion on it.
I'd just like to say that in 1918, they had cocaine in sodas. So maybe that pandemic was a little more tolerable. Just throwing that out there.
Original recipe needs to come back.
Right. I love so much of like what Webb said and what Nikki said and like Steve and Gerbo and the community and the purpose piece. Like it's just, I don't know, it stirred something in me because it's like the two things that helped me. I was super, super depressed when I was in Minot, like probably the first year. And it was community and purpose that helped me get through that. Because I had, you know, a great set of neighbors. Like we'd all exchanged keys, and it was, you know, we had a little Facebook group, and you could text people, hey, we're going to the dog park, who wants to go? And we'd all meet up. Or like, hey, can I borrow, I need milk, who's got milk? You know, you'd run down the hallway, grab some milk. We all lived in a big old apartment complex or whatever. And then like we'd exchange keys with each other. So it's like you'd stop by and walk somebody's dog, or like when I broke my foot, like my neighbor would take my trash out for me every day, and he'd walk Maggie. And that was huge. And then like, and it kind of goes into like what we were talking to, because then I got pulled up to be the shirt, and that was great. Like I had a sense of purpose before, but I didn't have, I don't know, like I had it felt like I had a real deep and meaningful purpose when I was doing that. And then I had a great commander that kind of talked about empathy, where you at, Steve Dubois, that he called it emotional capital, because sometimes it was really easy to get like really invested in people, and like you said, kind of get that who called it compassion fatigue. Is that somebody? I swear somebody threw that out, but you know, he would be like, now, Diana, we're not going to put a lot of emotional capital into this one. You know, like it wasn't that he didn't care. It was just we're not going to, like, we had a pedophile in our squadron that we were kind of always dealing with that situation. And I liked his thought process. Like, we're not going to put a lot of emotional capital in that one. Okay. But we are going to put a lot of emotional capital in this issue with this airman or whatever. So, but there were still days that, you know, I'd go in the office and close my door and have a good cry, and then go splash water on my face and come out and like, all right, open the door back up and be ready to rock. So
if I may talk about this community aspect, a lot of great information and people's perspectives on the importance of community and tribe, especially from the book. Sean, from a community perspective, from when we were stationed together in Arizona for a bit, being an EOD, going from such a tight-knit community to where you are right now, can you talk about some of the differences and some of the things that you've learned from your experience that you may be able to pass along to those who are not fortunate to be retired yet?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? So yeah, I mean, going to Davis-Monthan, that was probably the tightest group of people that I've ever seen in my life, and realistically, some of the best people I've ever known in my life. Like I've, you know, got some good guys that I deployed with that I stay in touch with, but I stay in touch more with the Davis-Monthan guys than I do anyone else. And yeah, because I went directly from Davis-Monthan into federal law enforcement, and it was definitely a culture shock. And I think one of the things that I'm always on the fence about this, because like I think tribalism is important to a certain degree, and I think community is more important than anything else. But I think when you lose the individual, or when tribalism gets to the point where you blindly follow an idea or a group of people, you can get into a lot of trouble. And I think coming from such a tight-knit, positive group to going to FLETC and seeing some of the backbiting, all in, it was very depressing to see that, because I wanted more of what I lost when I left there. And I think to a certain extent, it's the same as when I deployed. I come back from a deployment, I start doing things that are getting me back to that community, getting me back to a place where I feel comfortable and welcome. And after FLETC, that happened to be doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where a lot of tight-knit guys, getting together, trying to choke the shit out of each other. Somehow, trying to kill each other tends to make for a good community. So I think what I found was I had to find the subgroup or the subgenre and pick that as my tribe and pick it based on how positive it was and how much it benefited myself and how much I could benefit everything else. But of course, like after retiring from that, for you guys that don't know, I had to retire because of a medical issue. I have a heart condition, but the heart condition means that I can't do EOD work and I can't do law enforcement work anymore. So the subgroups, the subgenres, the cultures that I felt most comfortable in completely gone to me. So I'm having to kind of find a way to get back into that and get back into a positive culture where I'm benefiting society in some way, and kind of keeping my sanity, because it goes both ways. You benefit the tribe helps support you, helps get you through hardships, helps give you peace of mind. I'm rambling, sorry. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and looking for different perspectives, we have, Dave was telling us about empathy. We have, people that are retired EOD and still active EOD. But if it's all right, I'd like to hear from Nicole on the EOD community that she observed and what she thought of the community, what you thought of what you observed at your time as WIT and, spending time around us. What did you think of that?
So it was definitely a culture shock in the beginning. The 3 months of training that I did with the EOD folks before we even got downrange, where I got to see all the different personalities, all the different leadership levels, everything that was within EOD. And very quickly, I gravitated toward the EOD techs because on our WIT teams, we obviously had two different types of intel, a Army tactician, if you will, and then OSI, and then our EOD team lead. But it never felt that the EOD techs are where I gravitated to. I'm not your typical intel person. Other intel people weird me out. They're pretty nerdy, not my cup of tea. So obviously that's why I married a defender, completely different background. But so I gravitated towards the EOD techs pretty quickly because I felt they very quickly made me feel like I belonged from the beginning. Never, pushed me aside or made me feel like I didn't need to be there. However, other teammates did make me feel that way who were not EOD. So definitely very quickly saw the difference. And just the brotherhood that I saw, even with the female techs we had, they treated them like they were their little brothers. They didn't look at them like they were female techs, anything like that. So it was definitely something different because in my career field, it's not like that. Everybody eats their own. You don't have a lot of people that look out for each other. And that's part of the reason why I've stayed in my career field so long, is to try and change that culture and to try and make it better for the folks coming in after me, because I've never felt that within my own career field. So a lot of my mentors, a lot of my tribe are outside of my own career field. I don't have a lot of folks that I lean on within my own career field. And being down here, and I'm in a schoolhouse with cyber folks and other AFSCs, you will see that I lean more towards the cyber side, which is funny that they're the biggest nerds, yet somehow I feel closer connected to them. But the thing that I got from my time with EOD is that they take care of each other. There's never a question in whether I felt safe or not because they took care of me. Brad definitely was probably one of my favorite people because of that. Anytime I went out with his team, I never felt like I was worried. And I was only an airman at the time. And Brad made me feel like I was like his little sister. He's going to take care of me and I didn't have to worry. Because when I first got there, obviously I was terrified. I'm just sitting behind a desk in AC. What am I doing out here? But I never had any fear when I was with the teams that I was out with. I always felt like I was protected and going to be taken care of. So definitely it's a whole different group of people. And like I said in the beginning, I would do anything for any of my EOD brothers and sisters. If they asked at the drop of a hat, I would move mountains to make things happen for them. So yeah, I love my EOD family.
Right back at you. We've got nerds in this group too. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, I mean, Brad is pretty much our king nerd. Sweet D, she's our queen nerd. Jerry, he's the old nerd. You know,
Boomer nerd. He's a boomer
See?
nerd. Get it right.
Boomer nerd. Yeah, I was
boomer
on the
nerd. Yeah.
I was on the first landing craft on Nerd Assault to in the late '80s. Still have all my controllers and stuff from those days, but anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, Brad. Back to you.
Well, I believe Mario, you're up. You got any more to add? Excuse me.
All right. So the way I took the quote, and I've got a lot of respect for Sebastian Younger, and his previous cohort, Tim Wetherington, I think is his name. I actually got to go to a private screening of one of his films up at Google headquarters, and got a chance to chat with him for a little bit, and I thought he was a real down-to-earth guy. But the quote is interesting because we talk about tribalism, things that are important to us, and when I look at it from the military lens, so a lot of us, Brad, Gerbo, probably Sean, D, we came in when we were 18 or 19, maybe, right.
I was 21, Mario.
Okay, you got me by 2 years. I'm sorry. But those were our early years with our parents. Some people had a great childhood growing up. Some people didn't. But then we come in the military. And especially, I can't speak for other career fields, but our career field, I know, is very tight-knit. And, most people get EOD badges tattooed on them. And, Gerbo became family. D became family. Brad, everybody becomes part of our family. We'd do anything for them, and especially going through all that stuff. But there is something after that. And that's one of the angles I think is important to talk about, is knowing that you only have X amount of time left with this current family. There is going to be something after that. And I think it's important to discuss these things. Brad, we've talked about this before, about the career field not becoming your entire entity, your complete self, because that is something that could be taken away from you. We get tattoos, we talk EOD, this and that, but the fact is that you're not going to be part of that forever. And not a lot of people, I think, are talking about what's next. And that's why I wanted Sean to at least give us his perspective on what happened afterwards. And I think that's one of the main reasons why veterans are having such a hard time, right? Like, especially during COVID, especially because people that they would normally have access to, family members that they would normally have access to, may not be able to have that anymore. So we talk about interpersonal relationships and the importance of having that connection with somebody, not just high-fiving each other in a supermarket, but actually having a conversation of substance people don't have that anymore. So, we look at VTCs and the technology that everybody talked about. I don't think it's a replacement for face-to-face interaction, but I think it's a hell of a lot better than not doing anything and people withdrawing. The term social distancing doesn't actually mean to not be social to people. Like, when you think about it, it's physical distancing. I can still be social to you 6 feet away. So
That's what my wing commander, Mario, like he says that he has stopped using the term social distancing, and he uses physical distancing, socially connected, because he wants to, I think, kind of change the narrative. Just because like the wing has, like I said, we've experienced a lot of loss. I think for a wing, I've never been in a wing that had 5 losses, so close together. And one of those was a suicide during COVID. So I kind of like the idea of taking it, we're physically distanced, but we're still socially connected. Like, I'm not going to get to see Brad's smiling face in DC this month. I'm still super bummed about it, but I get to see him here. So I'll take that over, and I get to see him on the BTC when we do that too, but it's better than nothing. Oh, I know, honey. So I like that. Just because we're physically distanced doesn't mean we can't find a way to connect.
Yeah, and just because we're physically distanced and separated doesn't mean that we can't still work on this idea of creating dialogue amongst one another. Because for me personally, dialogue with you guys and girls is helping me get through COVID, not to mention life itself. And, the fact that we have a VTC right now, we have a person in Germany, Italy, Gerbo's somewhere where the really old people are, all that stuff, California. And, it's just nice to see everybody come together and have dialogue. Right, Gerbo?
I'm just responding in memes from now on.
You don't have to stand for that.
Well, South Carolina, for those who.
He might be a boomer, but he's my meme dealer.
I got your back, Jerry.
Thanks, Dave. Hey, who is the guy in the house that they're going to come to when the Wi-Fi isn't working? Us, right? We're going to reset the router. So, hello.
That I can't help you with.
So first of all, everything that's been said tonight's been awesome, and we got some great perspectives and great thoughts, and this is killer. Like I said at the start of this, I look forward to this all week, and this is why. Something that I was thinking about this whole time that comes to my mind, and I can think of a very specific example in our deployment when I realized I had enough of it, was competition, right? So hardship, right? People thrive on hardship. That's what this is saying. And then also people stand to not feel necessary. So to me, that comes back to the veteran-civilian divide and not furthering it, not making it even worse, right? Because how many times you see like somebody who did 30 years, hey, thank you for the service, as they say, and they get on Facebook to put up some huge thing about how they still get up at 5 a.m. to raise Old Glory and all this stuff. And that's all well and good. That's awesome. I'm glad you do that. Love it, right? But you're going out there to try to pretend like you're better than other people for it. Like, that's not what you should do with that experience, is my personal take. Like, you should have that as your personal experience and maybe help other people who have different experiences. Like, don't demean people that haven't been through those things. That's what I'm really getting at. That's the point of all this. Yeah, exactly. DD 214 Brigade 100. Like the example that I kind of briefly mentioned, we had 2 teams at a forward operating base, and we got back from doing a whole day of route clearance that was not very exciting. We had a couple whatever calls, and like the other team that was back at the FOB had gone out and done some other calls, and I just got so tired of every time we come back, they're like, oh yeah, well we had this and we had that and we had this. Like, that's cool. Like, are you trying to pretend like you're better than me before it? Like, I mean, awesome. I'm glad you guys got out and did some stuff. That's great. Cool. But that doesn't mean you're better than me because you maybe had it worse today. Like, that's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts is like, don't demean other people's hardships because that's how you make people feel meaningless. You know, look at their hardships and try to find a way to relate to them and help them to overcome their hardships instead of compete with their hardships. That's the point of this rant right now. So, yeah, that's my big takeaway.
I like to say that there's no ownership of pain. You know, when something bad happens, it's not my way to grieve. You know, it's not right or wrong. It's what looks like to you. And when somebody says that you should do this because it's the right way or the wrong way, they're trying to take ownership of that pain. And it's not one person's pain. It's shared. It's everybody's. It's not something bad happens and it doesn't belong to just them. It belongs to everybody involved. This thing that we're talking about, and it affects us all, you know. And it's just, I think it's nice to see people coming together and at least talking about it.
Thanks. Well, I go back to Brad's one of his video, respond versus react, right? So we can either categorize somebody's struggle through our own lens and go, well, that's stupid. I mean, in my day, we were just trying to survive wolf attacks, and you're worried about, you know, how to phrase a text so it doesn't upset your teacher when you're asking a question. You know, these are the things I've learned in my house mostly, with how a different generation responds to what is hardship. And when I'm doing it poorly, I alienate and I say, I just categorize that as dumb. It doesn't matter. But really, to them, it's a real struggle. Yeah, I mean, it means something to them. So it's a better response is let's hear it out. Let's talk it through. Maybe can share some perspective, maybe help them through it. And it really doesn't take that much of an investment of my time or my emotional capital, right? To just give a shit, just to care a little bit, instead of just reacting. That's stupid, you know? So that's why I really don't have a lot of, for those who know me, my social media presence, I don't have conversations with people in comments and threads because I just can't deal with people that have no rules. Nicole mentioned it too, the faceless, even people you know, like they have no filter. They'll just say whatever. And I'm like, good Lord, would you ever have said that to me in person? Like, I'm way too thin skinned to have a conversation like that. But what I can have is a grown-up conversation where we kind of like, okay, well, maybe I'll just hold back a little bit and listen for a minute and then weigh in, you know what I'm saying? But you don't have that on social media a lot, so I don't really play on there. But I do care a lot about it. I want to learn those skills, like how to not make everything about me or my perspective. And I've learned so much. I love talking to our Vietnam vets when they share their experiences, because it's a big difference in how they rolled. Maybe there's a lot of commonalities in our ops that I also find very interesting too. The chicken wire and sash cord and bubblegum techniques are kind of similar, like a lot of things that we have had to do in situations. But how we take that lesson learned forward and into our lives is sometimes very insightful if you just listened. So Brad, I'm just throwing that in on what you were just saying. So go ahead and finish your train of thought there.
My train of thought was pretty much finished. You know, the big, in summary, the TLDR is don't diminish other people's hardships because sometimes you could actually help them see the meaning in their hardships and then value, and they'll feel like they have a purpose. So that's pretty much it for my little take there at the end. I don't really have a whole lot else to add other than that. I would like to give anybody that has anything else to say an opportunity before we close it, if they have any other things to add to the entire conversation tonight.
With what you were saying, Brad, about like the competition, I say this a lot on. This is just kind of, it might be semi-relative. Like, back in my day, you used to have to do it this way, or we used to have to do it this way, or kids these days don't even know how to drive a manual. Back in my day, we only had manual. That's what you had to drive. And I always think like, and then what? and then what? What are you going to do with that information? If it was so tough,
$20 at the end of that story.
Well, I mean, just like, okay, things were that much more difficult. All you're doing is just telling me how much more difficult life was when you were alive.
Didn't even have feet.
How about a lesson that you could take and share with me to, in case I come across that same thing? I always think, and then what? I had one more question. Sean, does Joe Rogan know you do jujitsu? You might want to reach out.
No, we're not going that way.
That's a joke. I had a question for you about that. That was just a joke, because I had to stop doing it. I'm hopefully once my elbows get all set back in, I can do it again. But it's semi-relative to this conversation. Is like that. Did you find like a sense of purpose when you were choking out your friends and doing
Depended
jiu-jitsu?
on which friend it was, but
yeah.
No, I mean, I think with me, like when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was mentally in a very bad spot. So I needed something, and I think I was trying to replicate that feeling of like overseas combat, and there were a lot of other veterans that were in there, and it was a way to get out my aggravation, fight, but not actually hurt anyone, and it kind of morphed into something a little bit more holistic, because you start learning stuff that you take, you take into other areas, like taking your ego and getting rid of it, because that's the worst thing you can do, because the second you let your ego get in charge, you're going to start making mistakes, and next thing you know, your 16-year-old girl's choking you out on the mat, and you have to wake up after wetting yourself. Not a true story, just throwing it out there as an example. But like letting go of the ego was a big thing. One of my biggest things I learned when I was doing that is because like I was normally one of the bigger guys that do it, and bulldozing my way through problems doesn't solve anything. But if I just move an inch over and let the guy do what he's going to do, I might end up on his back, with a rear naked choke, or I might, get into a better position than I was before. And I started doing that with my own life, where people would start raging or they'd do whatever they're going to do. Okay, go for it, buddy. Let me know how it turns out. I'm going to step over here, and we'll figure this out after you're done. And I don't know, for me, there's a lot of life lessons that you can get from that experience. But yeah, definitely like finding people is more like everybody had a common goal. They just wanted to get better at jiu-jitsu, and we found other things that we had in common while we were going through, and it's a pretty positive experience.
I like it. I can't wait till I heal up and get back into it. You do it too, Steve?
I was just gonna say, man, jiu-jitsu can be a whole topic here, like legit. I'm sitting about 5 feet away from the Arizona State champ when he was 10 years old. He's a little beast. He's also
a big deal.
He's gonna be. He's got headphones on right now, so that's the only reason I'm saying that. Put your headphones back on. You're fine. But I was gonna say, man, like it's that stuff, right, that we're talking about with hardship and like the struggle, because you're never going to master it totally. Like, and what Sean's saying about like the ego. So I had to stop because of my knees, and it's sort of like spiritual through my son at this point. Like, it's amazing to watch people sort of start to get the love for the struggle, like where they see meaning in the struggle. Like jiu-jitsu is legit life. And I'm saying that from the sideline, you know, unfortunately, because I'm broken. But it's amazing to watch that and to see, like, it's initially like, well, it's really hard. And it's like, oh man, you know, for some people, they're great athletes and they could go play some other sport and just kill, right? They'll get out there on a basketball court or whatever. And it's like, man, 95% of the people you go up against, you're just going to wreck them. And it's like, it's ego all day, right? You're just constantly getting fed. And in jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter, man. A brown belt, black belt you can have a rough go with someone at a lesser, you know, level than you. And the humility, people get humbled all the time. And then they fall in love with the struggle. And it's like, it speaks to them. And then they go back for more. And then it's like, this is life, man. This is life. And, you know, people will change their addresses. There's an EOD guy right now at Luke, Arizona, who like moved to the same place my son went to. We introduced him to the place, and it's family environment. You want to talk about village, all this stuff we're talking about. And then the love of the struggle, because there's purpose in that. And like Sean said, it's life. It's life. You start seeing all the things in life that you're doing on the mat, and it's a beautiful thing, and it hurts. I think about Anthony Bourdain, you know, rest in peace, who talked about, you know, jiu-jitsu and what that did for him. And this kind of comes full circle to something Mario said, I think the first time I was on, and I'll end with this, where you said, it's important, you know, when someone took their life, it's important, you said it there, where it's important to sort of acknowledge that there's a time period that you may have given that person. And I think about Anthony Bourdain in that time, like he was struggling with a lot of stuff, but he found jiu-jitsu like a few years earlier. And like, he found a lot in that. And who knows, maybe that gave him, you know, some years and some expressions to someone else. He may have even helped someone else out along the way and pushed them up, you know, where they made it. And unfortunately he didn't, but I think it's beautiful. Jiu-jitsu, and that's one thing. It's like, is there other stuff like that? I know as a former football player, like, it's hard to replicate that in life. You're just like, that struggle, like physically, I mean, everything you're giving, but you love it. Even though it hurts, you love it. So I think that's a great, like, microcosm about stuff that the reason you guys started this whole thing is, you know, can we look at the struggle and not love the bad feelings, but see meaning and purpose in struggling well.
Yeah. I mean, drop the mic. The same thing keeps happening over and over and over again. The same way forward, the same path. And that's where this idea came from. You know, Brad and I sharing an office in New Jersey and constantly talking about this stuff. You know, talking about it with Gerbo over the years. Same thing with Weber, same thing with Sean. You know, now we're talking about it with everybody, and it's, the idea is to keep this dialogue going so that hopefully if 100 people or if 10 people listen to this or hear it, that at least one person gets maybe one little thing out of it that makes them stay an extra day or two on this planet longer. Then poof. That's how I measure success. I don't know, Brad, you want to add to that, but those are my 2 cents.
Man, I got nothing to add. That's it right there. I just say thank you, everybody who came in on the call tonight. Thank you for all your thoughts. Thank you for providing your perspectives and insight. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. I'm not gonna lie, it's 10 o'clock here my time, and I gotta be up a little extra early tomorrow on good old Monday, more than normal. So I'm gonna have to sign off here in a minute. But if anybody's got anything else to add, go ahead and unmute yourself real quick. If not, we'll go ahead and end it here.
Hey, shout out to Dave and Nicole. Pleasure to meet you both, and thank you for your insight. And great seeing the rest of the group. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dave and Nicole.
Yeah, I really appreciate you two joining us. Not really sure knowing what we were going to do, but you know, it's obvious within the first couple of minutes that you both were a very good addition to this conversation. So we really appreciate you putting yourselves out there. And you know, there's nothing to say that we won't do this again in the future. So from me, thank you.
Okay, on that note, I am gonna go ahead and sign off and take my happy butt to bed.
Take care, guys.
See ya.
All right. Good night.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Goodbye.